We need an investigation into what happened with the COVID response. I have colleagues here that were in the COVID cabinet, and now that it seems the public tide is changing, that all of a sudden they're trying to distance themselves from the decisions that they made there. If people start coming on side and start seeing things the right way and start representing their constituents and representing Albertans, then I think it's a good thing.
We need a justice system that ultimately delivers justice and adheres to the laws of the land.
I come from a farming family in a farming community. I know how important agriculture is and where my food comes from. This is a fight that we have to have.
And when we get into fall respiratory virus season, we're going to make sure that we have enough room to be able to handle that surge in patient load. That's the first step I'd take.
Let's do early testing, because when you do early testing, there's just so many options available for treatment. That was the intention of why I did the interview, and I hope that people do that.
I'm so privileged to be invited. It doesn't matter to me what party you're part of, but I sold 25 memberships that day.
It's not a misunderstanding, she said it. Just apologize. I've made lots of mistakes. I continue to make them. I try to make as few as possible, but once you make them, talk to the team, apologize, and move on.
Yes, it's always difficult when you're in these debates to try to make your points, and I think the reason why I did go a little bit personal, and it's not what I usually do, because I think it's important to critique the ideas and not the individual.
Adam Soos here on location for Rebel News at the first official UCP leadership debate. All 7 leadership hopefuls for the United Conservative Party of Canada will be here tonight debating it, arguing over who has the best ideas to lead this province forward. To catch this full report and all our coverage of the UCP leadership race, make sure to go to ucpleadership.com.
You likely noticed in that brief intro that there was, a helicopter in the background. And if you're wondering where we're at, the UCP debate tonight is actually taking place in Medicine Hat at the Halo Air Ambulance Hangar. A bit of an unconventional location for a debate, but it is providing one heck of a background.
I want to take a moment to clarify a comment I made in a podcast last week about cancer that was misunderstood. I know that cancer can strike anyone at any time without any relation to lifestyle, especially kids. But not just kids. It happened to my mother-in-law too. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and only survived 3 months after diagnosis. And by the time they found out, she was so malnourished that they weren't able to continue her chemo treatments. That's why I became such a proponent of early detection, early treatment, nutrition, and holistic medicine. There are so many more options. If you diagnose early, then you can treat early. And that's what I was trying to say, albeit very awkwardly. But it's in that vein that is why I proposed health spending accounts.
I know a lot of people in there started to boo as you were particularly harassed on the cancer comment. I know a lot of people out there took that to mean that healthy lifestyles and early testing can reduce severity of outcomes. Do you feel that this, along with some of the articles out there painting you as a kook and an outsider, are part of a concerted effort to attack a clearly defined frontrunner?
You know, the Mayo Clinic talks about early testing and biomarkers. This is why I-Corps Blood Services has put forward a proposal to the government on a pilot project to do exactly that. Let's do early testing, because when you do early testing, there's just so many options available for treatment. That was the intention of why I did the interview, and I hope that people do that.
Justin Trudeau plans to bring in restrictions on fertilizers, as we've seen in Denmark, which led to absolutely massive protests, and we've seen these sort of ideas spreading throughout Europe, set to come here. What can Alberta do beyond simply issuing a letter and making a statement to ensure that farmers aren't devastated in Alberta?
Yeah, this is something I came out about last weekend. It's something that almost all candidates on stage tonight agreed with, that we can't allow that to happen, especially because production in agriculture, and even when it comes to energy, is an area of provincial jurisdiction. We have to stand up at a time where we do have a food shortage right across the world. Alberta has the ability to feed the world. I come from a farming family in a farming community. I know how important agriculture is and where my food comes from. This is a fight that we have to have.
I believe yourself and a number of other people have said, well, they don't want to weigh into sort of the judicial process, but when the judiciary is categorically overstepping, we're now seeing, whether it be Tamara Leach or Pastor Artur Pawlowski, just categorical repudiations of what the courts did. At what point is it the responsibility of politicians to publicly advocate when so much wrong is being done by the judiciary?
Well, the judiciary ultimately needs to be held to account, and there's due process for that, and I'm in favor of that due process. Look, we need a justice system that ultimately delivers justice and adheres to the laws of the land. There's a process, and you know what, again, we've seen some decisions recently that exonerate those that were accused early days, ultimately that's good news and that's justice.
You talked about the resistance towards anger responses, but I think for many you were probably perhaps pursuing Danielle Smith in the most fiery and impassioned way. How do you sort of balance that, sort of attacking her head on, even some personal jabs about not needing a talk show host?
Yes, it's always difficult when you're in these debates to try to make your points. And I think the reason why I did go a little bit personal, and it's not what I usually do because I think it's important to critique the ideas and not the individual. But I think it was the comments around cancer, which were very hurtful. As a former Minister of Community and Social Services, I can tell you I've dealt with a lot of vulnerable individuals who have suffered from cancer and mental health issues thereafter. And we've all, you've been in contact with a loved one who suffered. But then mistakes can be made. It's all right. I've made mistakes and you apologize, you move forward. But the doubling down was not appreciated.
What is a concrete action that can actually be taken? Because we heard similar language on, well, we're not going to allow the federal government to mandate COVID response, and then they did. We can say those things, but what's a tangible way to do that?
Yeah, we're already seeing other provinces step up and just say that we are not going to accept those targets, which will in fact, again, reduce production. Because I think when we look at the production side, it's one thing, the federal government tries to make it about emissions or limits on fertilizer, but when it comes to production, that is in fact an area of provincial jurisdiction, and that is protected in the Constitution.
So folks are certainly more than entitled to sort of eat breakfast with whoever they please, but a number of people sort of issued concerns with the fact that you were hanging out at a Justin Trudeau Liberal Stampede breakfast. Do you have any response on that ground?
Well, interestingly enough, a lot of folks who vote liberally, federally, vote conservative provincially. A tremendous amount of my constituents I was so privileged to be invited. Doesn't matter to me what party you're part of, but I sold 25 memberships that day. So it was fantastic because many of those folks come from my constituency and they invited me to come. It was a huge privilege to be there with them.
We need an investigation into what happened with the COVID response. I have colleagues here that were in the COVID cabinet, and now that it seems the public tide is changing, that all of a sudden they're trying to distance themselves from the decisions that they made there. I agree also that throwing money at it isn't going to solve the problem. We have an AHS system that needs a severe renovation. They've had 15 years to get it right, and they've been failing all the time. We have a shortage of healthcare workers. We have emergency rooms being shut down in rural Alberta. We have a post-secondary system in Alberta that doesn't graduate the needs of our society when it comes to healthcare workers and other educational opportunities. And we have a College of Physicians that isn't helping either. We need to get the test done and the treatment done that we need.
All right, that's zero, Mr. Loewen. Thank you.
Many politicians are now trying to sort of cash in on the freedom sentiment, celebrating Artur Pawlowski's win, calling Tamara Lich a freedom fighter. You're the only leadership candidate who paid a political price for standing up when it wasn't popular. What do you make of people sort of attempting to cash in on that now?
Well, I think it's a little hypocritical, but again, if people start coming on side and start seeing things the right way and start representing their constituents and representing Albertans, then I think it's a good thing.
So much ado has been made about Danielle Smith's comments last week. Towards the end there, the crowd became a little agitated. I think for some people reading that, obviously people have to be careful when talking about cancer, but I think for some it was taken as, and some I spoke with, Danielle Smith was saying that there can be positive health outcomes even with serious illnesses if there's additional healthcare opportunities. You seem particularly sort of upset about that for obvious reasons. I completely understand that. But do you think that there's a bit of sort of scandal generating for comments that were maybe taken a little bit out of hand?
No, everybody makes mistakes, but when you make it, don't call it a misunderstanding, apologize and move on. It's just not appropriate, and I don't think she should have done that. But at this stage, she needs to backtrack it, and I think that would be the best thing. But I'm not here to talk about her. I just think that I'm speaking for a lot of people that went through death in their family from cancer, and it's not a pleasant experience. And I frankly don't think people should just throw it out there that they believe that something can be accomplished through naturopath methods. Now, let's be clear. I'm under a naturopath right now. I've been under their care for about 3 months now, because that's what enables me to do what I need to do during this leadership race. And I think they certainly have their calling, and they're excellent at what they do. And I think alternative medicines should be what we look at under a doctor's advice. And doctors, look at a lot of different things, and we need to be open-minded about healthcare, because one size fits all doesn't fit everybody for healthcare. We have rural Alberta and we have urban Alberta, and we need to make sure that we have healthcare right across Alberta. And that means not access to a lineup, it means actually access to healthcare. And I just think that it's important that that Albertans feel that somebody's speaking for them on the issue of cancer, and cancer is the great killer right now.
And so just to confirm, you agree maybe with some of her sentiment as far as providing better health care, but just the nature of her comments towards cancer may be a little inappropriate?
It's not a misunderstanding. She said it. Just apologize. I've made lots of mistakes. I continue to make them. I try to make as few as possible, but once you make them, talk to the team, apologize, and move on.
As a follow-up to that, the sentiment of sort of separation is at an all-time high. People are very upset. What would you do differently within that constitutional framework to get Alberta a better deal?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that. My riding has a really, really diverse population. We have a lot of folks that are angry and frustrated. Part of that is our fault. We have used people in this province as collateral damage in a fight between left and right, whether that was through COVID policy, whether that's through various things. There's a tremendous amount of desire, I think, to actually work together and to collaborate. There are angry folks. We have to be able to bring people back in. You can't do that unless you lead by example. So I'm hoping that as we bring these diverse Conservative candidates around the table, that we're able to manifest a really strong and competent group of people that speak to everybody. We haven't spoken to people. Do you know how important it is in the midst of all of that to be able to have a conversation to de-escalate misinformation? That was a huge, huge loss on our part. And instead of using the opportunities to really build at a time, and I have to tell you, I was a Minister of Culture, Multiculturalism and Status of Women at that time. And what I saw was tremendous compassion and giving, you know, through the churches and community associations and gurdwaras and temples and mosques. In the midst of all of this, 90% of the people went and took care of seniors. They created baskets for people and took them to their communities. They left food out on doorsteps. I mean, our family were singers. We went and sang outside on doorsteps at Christmas for senior citizens. We made sure that we dropped off CDs and information for people so that they were able to access things at a time when they were so alone and isolated. I have to tell you, as much as I understand the pain and the suffering, I also saw tremendous strength in our province. And if we have the right leader to be able to build on that strength and that capacity, that's the Alberta I know. That's what I grew up with. That is the vision that has to come forward from any movement that decides and has the privilege to be able to lead this province forward. Because if we don't lead by example, if the opportunity to be able to have a discussion, no matter how difficult it is, to not shy away from a robust debate, to be able to bring things to the floor, you'll never know where people stand. You won't honestly have an authentic idea of where people are. So I'm really hoping that with a different approach and a thoughtful and kind person at the helm who is competent, who's been elected for 7 years, who's had multiple portfolios, and a person who, I love Alberta more than I can even explain to you. And I'm just compelled to be able to give back. And there's really not much more to it for me than that. There's no special interest, there's no machine behind this team. This is a simple desire to be able to give back to a province that has given me so much.
I think for many Albertans, with the separation sentiment being higher than Quebec now, the problem is for years and years we've been giving billions of dollars away, paying the bill for the rest of Canada, and getting a very raw deal. A politician is coming up and saying, no, we're putting an end to this. How do you actually change things compared to we're working on it, nothing happens, and actually stand up for Alberta?
Yeah, good question. So just saying that, you're going to put an end to it doesn't mean that you are going to put an end to it. Again, just going back to my previous comments. And I said, it's a tough task. And right now, MPs have a significant role. That is their whole job, to fight with Ottawa for our rights. And we most definitely have to have a Conservative government in place for the next mandate. I mean, all of these things are going to help. But one thing that we can do right away, I talked about security of supply. Geopolitical events right now have actually poised Alberta in a very unique situation to be the supplier of energy, to be the supplier of food. And we need to make sure that we have a strong Western identity with the other provinces and we make more alliances down south. And that collaborative is going to put more pressure on Ottawa. And let me just give you an example. Germany is moving more towards coal-powered energy right now. And Trudeau was talking to Germany about LNG, right? We just need to put more and more pressure about the value proposition. I think it's doable, but we can't be breaking the law. I mean, that's not how things work here. That's not why my family came to Canada. They came here for stability, safety, and predictability.
Well, the first official UCP leadership debate has wrapped up here at the Halo Air Ambulance Hangar in Medicine Hat. It was great to see the people actually engaging, going at it with each other, some real back and forth, certainly not what we saw at the last federal leadership debate. We also had an extensive opportunity to ask some real tough questions during the scrum. It's great to have this type of access and to be covering the story and asking the questions you need answers to. For all of our coverage, make sure you check in regularly at ucpleadership.com. As always, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. Hey everybody, as you just saw, the very first official UCP leadership debate is in the bag. I just actually left the meet and greet that took place afterwards and actually had the opportunity to book a number of the leadership candidates for long-form exclusive interviews to make sure you don't miss out on any of that content and that you catch all of our reports on the UCP leadership. Make sure you check in regularly at ucpleadership.com.